to Simpler. We are three pastors, husbands, and fathers on a journey to make life simpler by holding Jesus as the core for every belief and practice. This journey has shaped us to be more like Christ, freed us from the shame of failure, and encouraged us to a deeper love of our Lord and God. We invite you to join us in the discussions that have shaped and continue to shape our lives.
So that way people know.
I'm glad
Pierce is about to.
Serious question. Did you just like mix a bunch of stuff in?
Mm-hmm. So it's
raisins and almonds and
it's Hit the Trail mix from HEB, which is really good.
Okay.
But it's also, I did some chili mango in there as well, and some plantains, and then a tablespoon of chocolate morsels to make kind of my own trail mix.
Cool.
Yeah.
That is cool. Are you selling it?
Yes.
Simpler trail mix.
Actually.
I know, right? I think we should do
It'd be one ingredient.
Yeah, that's right.
For Micah, it would have to be because he's allergic to
It'd be
everything.
sunflower seeds.
Yeah.
I was thinking, have y'all seen
Micah's brand of trail mix?
Have y'all seen people make sorbet? So you can like blend up fruit and like you're doing a smoothie and then freeze it and then you can scoop it out like ice cream.
That's cool.
Anyways, I was thinking about doing that and then just adding sunflower seeds at the end. Not with the shell.
The crunchiest sorbet.
The extra, like you got to take a bite and then you got to spit out the seed.
Yeah, that'd be good though. A little bit of the salty with that.
Just something. Yeah.
That does sound good.
Well,
hey, let's go on over to the PCC, everybody. Come on over to Pierce's Culture Corner. Let's hang out. This one is more of an observation for myself, and I think that curious if you guys kind of experience the same thing. But as becoming a parent, so now I'm a parent of two. I've realized it wasn't until like recently though that I've really become a parent that like I'm experiencing different things for like the first time again, it feels like. So it's more specifically, I think the reason why I've noticed it so clearly is like there's two particular movies that I've watched recently where I'm like almost in tears or like taken aback by a certain situation that didn't bother me the first time. And so one of them was we went and saw the anniversary re-release of episode 1 of Star Wars. And so it was so much fun to see in theaters again. So I saw that when I was 9. We tried to beat my dad's record. My dad went and saw the original Star Wars 25 times in theaters.
Wow.
I know, right? And me and my sister.
The original 3, you mean?
No, the first one.
Okay.
So 1977. Yeah, so he went and we told him, we're going to beat your record. And my dad was like, well, movie tickets were like 75 cents back then. Like I was able to do that because that was like my weekly allowance pretty much. I could just spend everything on it. And my sister and I were spending like $5 a movie ticket, but we got up to 9 times. And so we each spent $45 to see it. But anyway, we went to go see it. It's super enjoyable. But I found myself like at certain moments, like where Anakin's like leaving the house as a parent, I was like, oh, like that's heartbreaking. Like as a kid, I'm like, yeah, let's go be a Jedi. Let's go do this. And then like, even as like that feeling like reverberated for so long. And then recently we watched it in theaters and I was like engulfed into it. And I was like, man, like he's like 9 years old. It's your 9-year-old that you are pretty much making a vow to say, I will never see you again. And
to his mom, you mean?
To his mom. Yeah. So like, and same thing from his mom's perspective. Like she understands the weight of what it means for someone to go off and be a Jedi. Like most of the time they're gone before you even know the kid. Like they're gone this is a
perfect
I know, isn't that crazy? Yeah, it works out really well. So that was one where I was just like, oh, that's heartbreaking, like, but also exciting because they didn't have a future there on that plane. So it's just like this weird mix of emotions that I didn't.
Well, I think as a mom,
all.
if Liam Neeson is taking your kid away, you know that even if someone kidnaps him, he'll be able to take care of it. You know,
and then what if he gets taken? What did he do in that movie?
Will he
died.
Fight the wolves? That's the question.
But will he fight the wolves?
We don't know.
He will lose them to the wolves. But if they get taken by an Eastern European gang member, then he'll get them back.
I'm still ready for the 3-hour version of The Grey 2, where it's just a wolf battle for 3 hours.
Me too.
The next one that we watched kind of in preparation for the new one was the newest Planet of the Apes trilogy.
Okay.
Have y'all seen that?
Is that good?
Those? Oh, I love them, man. Rise, Dawn, and Fall.
Oh, sorry.
Not that I
prep for the new one.
Yeah, so we rewatched the prequel trilogy to watch this new one, and I don't know if they're preparing for another prequel trilogy or what. I don't know how the timeline works, but we watched. Have y'all seen those?
Yes.
Right, they're so much fun. I love those.
I've seen at least 2.
I gotcha. The third one took me off guard because I wasn't expecting that, but this isn't a movie review channel. This is my PCC. So, which usually ends up being
about children leaving.
Yeah. So like these interactions between some of the children. So like he has a son by this spoilers. He has a son by the second movie, and they're having their second son. Their first son is already like in teenage years. And you see this like inner turmoil between his son of like wanting to follow his dad, but also he doesn't fully understand his dad's decisions, but he understands the immaturity of some of these other decisions that these apes are making. And so like these dynamics were like as
Planet of the Apes.
Planet of the Apes, yes. This was in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes specifically.
Yeah.
And just as a parent watching it, being like, dude, just like your dad has shown like he loves you, like trust your dad more than you trust this. But like as a teenager, like there's like I want to be rebellious. There's that mentality, but also like I don't fully understand what's going on. In the midst of that, they're also having a kid. The wife is sick, and so like there was so many just family aspects in this movie that I remember being sad for and moved by initially, but then like having a kid, seeing, I mean, with Riley, her going to the NICU, like having a sick child, having a situation where I'm having to take care of my wife and take care of kids, just like me having those experiences. So like I'm watching a movie that I watched when I was in my 20s again. And I'm like it's like experiencing all the things again for the first time. Like, what is going on? And then in the third one, super spoilers, his oldest son dies in the first act, and he spends a lot of the main character spends a lot of his issues or throughout the movie trying to figure out, does he want vengeance or to protect his youngest child? And then there's this one scene where he just goes and holds his youngest child, who's like maybe in human years, like 2 or 3, like young, like toddler-esque. And it stays on that for so long. Like for an action movie, it feels weird, but like he's just holding his child for a long time. And you just see Andy Serkis is a genius actor. You see all of his expressions. And I was just like, I felt the weight of it in that moment, because I've held Adeline. I held Riley when we got her tubes out at the hospital, and just been not being able to fully connect with her and like hold her. And like, I've been in that situation. So I'm sitting there watching cartoon apes and I'm like shedding a tear in the audience. And so anyway, I think that it's interesting going through life, how you can have monumental things happen, whatever it may be. People talk about near-death experiences, parenting, different types of things in life. I think parenting is a huge one for most people, just how it alters so much of your reality and your outlook on life. And so you're right. This does play in really well in what we're talking about. Yeah. So, curious for you guys listening and watching, what are your parenting type stories? I know that we won't dive into, if y'all want to talk about it later throughout the podcast, we can, because what are we talking about today, Ryan?
Well, over the last few weeks, we received in the mail, I don't know, somewhere like a dozen different graduation announcements for friends of ours whose kids are finishing up high school, and they'll have like a little blurb on there about the kid or what they're planning to do. And then not just the ones we've received, I've seen so many people post them online. Hey, here's our son, here's our daughter graduating. And so it got me thinking, we're still a few years away from that with Asher, but it made me think, of course, about Seth, Micah. And we've talked a lot. We've done episodes on parenting before, but all those conversations have kind of been based on when they were young or what we do. So wanted to talk today about how do we prepare our children to leave the house and be godly people in this world, kind of standing on their own 2 feet. Really, look, some of that happens as they're going through high school, but now like really we're about to see the people they're going to be and how they're going to serve the Lord. So what does it look like for us to prepare our children for that?
Ryan, aren't kids just going to grow up and make the decisions they want to make in spite of us?
Dude, have you ever read the Bible?
I'm just focused on Jedi leaving the house, man.
that and apes. I mean, like from a practical standpoint, Proverbs 22:6, speaking of wisdom, not of Christianity, but speaking of wisdom, says, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. So I do think that if we instill wisdom in our children, they will tend towards wisdom. But I know that in the 20 plus years that I was doing traveling ministry, and you too, Micah, you did this a long time, that still are doing it, that there were people that I got to know when they were 12, 13, 14 years old, and then I watched them grow up and get married, and now they're having kids. So I've known these people for a long time, and a lot of them who seemed to be serving the Lord faithfully in high school, when they went away, when they got outside of that environment, that kind of insulated environment, they walked away from the Lord. And I think part of that, we've talked about this a lot. I think that part of that is that a lot of people were trained in a system and not trained in the gospel. So there's a system, and I think if we're going to prepare our children to do really well apart from us as kind of protectors of them and guardians of them, I think it cannot be, we can't give them the law. We can't give them a system of rules to safeguard them. I mean, not that there are never any rules, but from a biblical perspective, the law is not going to safeguard them. And we can't give them some sort of like formulaic thing as the end all, that like, hey, if you'll just, because I think what a lot of parents tend to do is say, look, when you get wherever you're going, get plugged into a church, which is great advice. It's great advice to be part of a community. But I think what we've done wrongly is we have framed getting involved in church as the end, as the thing, rather than, look, whatever you do, like, honor Jesus, like make your life about Jesus, and
which would then include
community.
Yeah. Because I think the flip of that would be like if a kid has no interest in being part of a local church,
yes,
then that's the same issue, right?
Yeah, something's off.
Right. But to your point, the goal is not to get them in church.
Yeah.
The goal is to your kid will honor Jesus with their life, which part of a sign of that happening is that they're going to have a desire to be part of a local community of believers.
Yeah. I think, and I don't think that as parents we like to consider this very much, but I think kids are way smarter than we give them credit for. They pick up on things way earlier than we think they're picking up on those things. And if we haven't, as parents, made it our aim to be directed and motivated by the things of Jesus, it's going to seem really inconsistent to them when we're saying, now go and be motivated by Jesus. And if we're not living our lives and building our homes in a way that's structured for, I want to proclaim Christ, then they're probably going to default back to our lowest standard, like whatever our lowest standard was, at least initially. Like there's that possibility. At least a tendency. That's their framework. Yeah. You guys both probably would say that like your struggle was that life in Christ wasn't framed very well for you by your fathers. Correct.
Right. So you didn't end up where your fathers were.
No.
But it was probably a lot harder for you to be there than for me, who had a great father.
Yeah.
Who would love Jesus. So that's what to your point, your defaults, like you guys have had to wade through more stuff than I did.
Right. And I had to, so I've said this before on the podcast. I was never one of those people. I heard this all the time in the 80s and the 90s. People were like, if you have a bad dad, you're going to view God as a bad dad. I never did that. I never folded back my perception of my father onto God. But, I was convinced when I left high school and went to college, I was convinced that what would make me a good Christian was going to church and not going to parties and not like, it was a list of do's and don'ts. And it really had very little to do with Christ. So I thought if I do these 3 or 4 things and I avoid these 3 or 4 things, that makes me a good Christian.
Yep.
But my affection wasn't about Jesus. My motivation, my goal was to look a certain way rather than be for Christ. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's the flip. Instead of saying I want my heart to be set on Jesus, which will then produce certain things in my life, you flipped it and said I want my life to look this way, which will then hopefully make people think that my heart's in this place.
Yeah, and that was the perception, right? And that's the way that a lot of people would talk about me is, man, Ryan's a really good guy. Like because I was Lubbock at that point, when I went in 93, Lubbock had 27 different weekly collegiate ministries that were available. And so you could be at something every night and multiple somethings every night if you wanted to be. And there were some really, really great things that were happening. And if you're at all of them, then and you go to all the mission trips your church offers, and then people are like, man, this guy, like he's really serious about the Lord. But one of the things that I had to realize later is that I don't doubt that I loved Jesus. I think that I had been taught that the way that I love Jesus is I do certain things rather than, like you said a moment ago, Micah, having the things that I'm doing flow from a love of Jesus. And I learned later in life that the flow, the wellspring of my Christian living had to start from a love for Christ and not do all these things so that I can learn to love Christ better.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the best things we can do, and like I said, I have a few years still, but these are thoughts that I'm having already as I look at my 15-year-old who's nearly looking me in the eye. Like he keeps telling me, I'm coming for you, Dad, I'm coming for you. And he's like an inch and a half shorter than me. Like he's so stinking close. And it's like, crap, he's going to catch me. But But as I'm looking at this young man in the eye and I'm trying to think, how do I shape him for if he does leave us in 3 years, or if I don't know what his plans are. He doesn't know yet. He's just finished 9th grade, but I want his perspective of Jesus to be correct.
Yeah.
And I'm actively thinking, I basically feel like a bad dad every time I start going down this rabbit hole because I'm like, what can I do to better prepare him? So can
I give you my thoughts?
I'd love it.
Being in that spot. I think that what you're talking about right now of teaching our kids the best we can to have a heart for Jesus, that has to be, if you were going to build, all right, this is probably a bad example, but I can't think of a better way to do this. So we'll just do this. And then if it crumbles, the allegory crumbles is fine. If you think about it like the food pyramid, which we found out later was like a not true thing. Do you know about that? Food pyramid's a lie. Anyways, but think about it kind of like a pyramid like that, or a network marketing scheme, however you want to think about it. Like any kind of pyramid you want to think of. So at the top of the pyramid in my mind is
that why you and Kemi had 4 kids? Because you each had to get 2 people.
Yep. Yeah.
And now they have to each get 2 people.
Yeah. It's a pyramid. So it just makes more sense, I think, to think about it in some kind of structure like that. Pick whatever structure you want. So at the peak would be teaching our kids to have a heart for Jesus, which I think is foremost, the core, if you will. So again, that's already crumbling because the peak is not the core. So give me some leeway on the allegory here, the illustration.
I'm going to draw this out while you're talking about it.
So a heart for Jesus is at the top, and I think what the reason I think about it like a pyramid is because I think about the flow, like from there it flows into everything else in life. So while you and I, Ryan, would agree with our sons, the core thing and really the only thing the thing we're most concerned about is that they have a heart for Jesus, right?
Absolutely.
I'm going to say this. I don't think that's the only thing I'm concerned about.
Sure.
So that's why I'm doing it like a pyramid. The sole thing I'm concerned about is that they have a heart for Jesus.
Yeah.
I think there's
everything
a lot
else will come from that.
Yeah. And I think everything else I teach them, I think also falls underneath that. So so now that I'm teaching them, like there's a few things that I've specifically, just my opinion, totally me. I don't think this is for everybody. There's a few things I've been very diligent to try to teach my kids, maybe sometimes to Cammie's dismay. One is, this is underneath a heart for Jesus, right?
Here,
so
drawing this out.
One would be,
this will be in the show notes.
One would be learning how to think correctly or reason through things.
Yeah.
So thinking correctly, thinking critically. One would be social interactions, and one would be like a correct view of finances. And then another one would be the other one might fall in the social interactions. Would be like, the other one would be with. So I think there's little branches underneath those things as well.
Okay, gotcha.
So I think that a lot of times what we do as parents is we think we put all those together in just one little bubble and think these are all the things I want to teach my kids. And I think it actually needs a shift. So now that we're thinking the heart for Jesus is at the core, at the top, everything flows out of that. Now, when I'm teaching them about finances, I'm teaching them from the perspective of how do I honor God with my finances, which there's a lot of practical that goes into that as well. Super funny story on that. Seth will most likely get his tuition and fees paid for with federal grants because of my income, because my income's not very much. So he will qualify for those things. And his roommate, Cullen, I was telling him that, and Cullen's not going to get anything. Like his dad makes more than that amount, and he's white, and he's not going to get a lot of scholarships. So he's like, Colin's not going to get anything. Although lucky for Colin, his dad invested when he was young smartly, so that his college could be paid for if he wanted to use that. I forget what it is, a 429 or something like that.
Yeah, 529.
529. I was only 100 off. But I was telling Colin about Seth getting that. He was
the
like,
429s for surgery.
Really?
No.
Oh, I was like, I don't know. So, but Colin was like, I was telling Colin that Seth was going to get that money. He was like, but you guys aren't poor. But what he's expressing is not our income. What he's expressing is he's seeing the fruit of diligent financial engagement, if you will. I don't know how to say that, from the perspective of how do I glorify God with my money. So that's what I want to teach my kids. It's like, I don't have to have I don't have to have a mindset where all I can talk about is Jesus. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
I'm not saying that's not the most important thing. What I'm saying is there's a lot of practical things that I think we as parents think of as like the same as a heart for Jesus. And I'm saying the core for us as parents has to be teaching our kids to have a heart for Jesus. But then I think there's a lot of practical things. I don't think, this is my opinion too, I don't think I'm actually sending my kid off. I think this is another phase of life. I think that parenting shifts through the years. There's a lot of parents who end up being grandparents and act like they're still supposed to be the parents in the same way they were to their kids when their kids were at home. I don't think that's okay. I think you, as a parent, your heart is to help your kid succeed in life and whatever they're doing, right? So if you're a parent of an adult kid, you go about it from the same perspective. You don't say, I'm your parent, you're going to listen to me. You do whatever it takes to help them succeed in whatever environment they're in. So if you have adult children, like, I don't think I'm sending Seth off or Aiden next year. It's just another phase of life. So what am I going to do? I'm going to do my best to help them succeed in whatever way I can in that. So like Seth and I, for example, have talked about paying for college. He's going to go to A&M, study engineering. He got into the honors engineering program. Like, this dude's super smart. He's going to be really successful in this. I just told him, I was like, hey, don't worry about money. I was like, I'm good at figuring stuff out. We'll figure it out, right? You're going to get at least probably 13 grand a year in grants and maybe some scholarships, and the rest we'll figure it out. Just, I don't want him to have to think or worry about money. I hate student loans. I think they're a scam. But if he has to take out student loans, we'll figure it out, right? I'll figure it out. I'm going to do whatever I can to help him succeed in that moment, and he shouldn't have to worry about those things because he's doing school. So that's practical, right? But it's still with a heart of, I want my kid to honor Jesus. But I don't have to, when we're filling out applications for scholarships or anything like that, I'm not like, well, where's Jesus in this? You see what I'm saying? Like, if you think about it in some kind of structure, like the pyramid might be a bad one, but like some kind of structure, there's not you
used to use the wagon wheel.
Ooh.
Right? So like Christ is the core.
The hub. Yeah. What you can do that. Yeah.
I'll draw the wagon wheel too.
That one's fun. That one's fine too. So that's my thought is like, I think a lot of times I think there's two sides of the thought. One group thinks, well, my kids are turning 18, they're off. Now they're just going to go be on their own. They do whatever they want to do. I think that's a terrible perspective. The other extreme is, I will never let my kids not be under the reign of my like iron fist, and I'm going to tell them exactly what they have to do in every moment of life. I think those are both very dangerous places to be. I don't think you should be that way as a parent, period, no matter how old your kids are. I think it has to be maybe something that varies per kid. Each kid's going to be a little different. But so I think this is my thought is like, let the heart for Jesus be the core of what you're teaching them. But then there's a lot of practical things. Like, I mean, we have so many buddies who are like really good mechanics. Like I've actually, I've tried to teach my kids as much as I know in mechanics. Like Seth,
I've already taught my kids as much as I know.
Here, so you open the car door. So like Seth changed his own oil the other day, and I watched him just to make sure. But like, I'm just trying to teach them as much as I can. But I also don't feel the weight of it. Like, I think there's a lot of parents who are like, what if I did a bad job? Maybe that's what you were expressing earlier. Like, what'd you say? You feel, every time you talk about this, you feel like a bad dad?
Terrible parent,
And maybe, I bet that comes from, tell me if I'm wrong, feels like knowing you, that comes from probably a tension of knowing where your dad was. And then like, it's in the back of your head. Like, what if I don't do a good job with my kids? Like, the turmoil you went through having to become your own person.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I feel like, man, I'm a pastor. I know the Bible fairly well. I know what it means to love the Lord. Like, what if I'm not doing enough to instill these things in my kids?
I gotcha. And that's maybe where that might be a personality between us. But like, I also think like, I'm going to do the best I can, but I have to really trust the Lord to some degree in terms of like what happens in their lives. Like, I can't take the pressure of every decision they make. Like, let's just say one of my kids does something really stupid in the next couple of years. I mean, it's going to hurt. I'm going to have sorrow. But while I might feel some weight, like you're saying, like maybe I should have done a better job in this, I can't bear the burden of every decision my kid makes. You know, I have to be a steward the best I can of what God has given me and my kids to shepherd them towards having a heart for Jesus, and then teach them all the things I can and the practical aspects of life. But it's ultimately still something they have to take ownership of.
Yeah.
It has to be their decision. I'm not sharing in this with the kids. I'm trying to like teach them, you know what I mean?
Right.
I'm trying to teach them. So that's my thought, is like, put whatever structure in place you want, but the core or the top or whatever is a heart for Jesus in everything you say and do, which I love. We'll pray as I'm dropping the kids off at school. Sometimes I pray for them. Sometimes I'll have them pray.
Keeping a scorecard now on there?
Scorecard. Yeah. But what I love is now Grayson's really the only one who does it. It's okay, to make you feel better. I don't pray with Ryan. I don't pray with Ryan
you
at all.
don't.
Every time you drop Ryan off at school, you never play with him.
I don't pray with Seth or Aiden anymore because they drop themselves off at school, right? So they drive their own. So I'll drop, the times I drop Grayson off, he'll pray. He prayed this morning. And said, gotta pray that I'll honor you in everything I do today. Like that is, I don't know if that clicks for him.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
He might just be saying that because he thinks that's what he's supposed to say.
And he's heard it from you, and
But that's literally all I can do is like model that for him.
Well, right
and
now
teach
you're
him
winning
that.
15 to -1.
That's true. I mean, it's on the scorecard.
So like, let's say hypothetically Grayson did something stupid this year.
Right.
Something really, really bad. I can't walk away going, you know what? I just haven't done a good enough job of trying to teach him to honor Jesus. I don't know what else I could do at this point,
right?
Besides the repetition of it to teach him to honor Jesus. I understand I think more people feel like you than me. I think more people feel like they're terrible parents. I think that's just a personality thing. I think that I'm going to take the world on and say, I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm just going forward. So that's not the majority of people. But I do think that there has to be a sense where we think of our kids not as our ownership, but the things that God has allowed us to have, to be stewards of or shepherds of, whatever you want, however you want to say that. And that should take some of the load off of, I'm going to do the best I can to show them Jesus and help them practically in life, and then try to help them along in different phases so that they will honor Jesus. Like, I'm trying to think of an extreme example. Let's say one of my boys got a girl pregnant in the next couple of years, right? That would not be a fun thing to deal with.
No.
But it would also be something we would just deal with.
Right.
It doesn't, Jesus doesn't change in the middle of that. Their identity in Christ doesn't change.
Yeah.
It might be a nut kicking. It might be, there might be some consequences they have to suffer, but it's just another phase of life, right? We've all been there where like we did something stupid and there was a consequence for that. And I think if we wallow in the sorrow of that sin, then we're not able to move forward. And so I think that you have to think of that in terms of your kids too.
Yeah, we still have to think of Christ as higher than our successes or failures.
Absolutely.
Yep. And then I think maybe one other thought, and I'll let you guys go. I got a bunch of stuff just like
no, you're good,
rolling off my tongue here. One of my biggest struggles, I think, just being transparent, is like thinking about, for example, Seth driving to A&M and back. Like as someone who's been on the road for years and years and years, I know how dangerous the road is.
Yeah.
So internally it freaks me out a little bit, and I have to step back when I freak out and go, this is God's control. I can't do anything about it. One way, like what is like, I can't worry about something in the hypothetical, right? If that makes sense. I can't let it affect my life now. I have to do my best to help him succeed in this part of life, which means now, like from a practical side, I'm probably not going to send him to college in a car that's unsafe. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to do the best I can, but I can't worry about the result.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
One of the biggest shifts for me, and not way before I was even a parent, was talking with you, Micah. And I think you would use that same language of being intentional within the phases of life where our kids are. I think one of the things I had asked was like, I was something silly about like sports, but I was like, at what point do you tell your kid they're bad at sports? Cause they're, I mean, you see like a 3-year-old play a soccer game, it's chaos. You're like, good job, buddy. Like you got out there, you did it. I was like, at what point? I think I forget how old your kids were at that point, but I was like, at what point do you like really drive home practicing? Do you kind of like assess where they are? Like, is this even important to them? I was like, how's that been for you? And one of the things you had mentioned in that conversation was like being intentional at every phase. Like too often we see so many parents baby their kids their whole life, or like you said earlier, have this iron fist over them this whole life. Like they will have one mode of action and thoughts towards their children the entire life. And then more often than not, especially the ones that baby their kids, they hit 18, they may move out of the house, whatever. And they're like, oh, you're not a baby. Like now how do I even address you anymore? Now you're an adult. I've only babied you your whole life. And so going into being a parent, that's one of the things that I've thoroughly enjoyed is just taking, I mean, as cheesy as it sounds, like taking advantage of the moment. Like, this is where you are in life, and I want to teach you and guide you and meet you where you are, and not be glued down to this. I mean, having Adeline's super awesome because we can reminisce about who Riley was as a baby, but Riley's very much not a baby. And so, like, we don't treat Riley the same way. We've had fun. Like, I have a memory app on my phone called Time Hop, where we'll see old pictures from Riley coming up. And now recently it's like Riley walking. I'm like, oh, at the same time, like Adeline's learning how to walk right now. So it's fun. It's cute. But like, I treat these two children very differently in regards to things. I'm having to teach Riley how to treat Adeline in the midst of it as well. A couple of times Riley will like rear back. I'm like, wait. Like, we're not gonna backhand your sister right now. Like, this is an accident. But then I look in Adeline's eyes and I'm like, was it an accident? What are you doing over there? The other day, right? So like, we're having a lot more conversations about the gospel right now because I mean, obviously it's the work of the Holy Spirit, but like Riley's able to engage in a lot of those conversations. And it was so funny. So like, she's mixing so much of what she's learning in life and school, like with the gospel. And so I'm trying to really intentionally kind of separate what's the character of God versus like what's the character of your teachers, like what's going on there. And so the other day I was pulling into a parking spot and it had one of those light poles with those huge, like, concrete barriers that were there. And I thought I was going to miss it, but I was like 1 inch off and I hit it and I just barely scraped Hannah's car. And Hannah was like, you didn't even see it. And so I got out and I was like, I'm going to have to buff that out. So I was like, I'm sorry. And I got out and Riley goes, it's okay, Dad. And I was like, oh yeah. And she goes, it wasn't on purpose. And I was like, it wasn't on purpose. Mistakes happen. She goes, mistakes happen. Then as we're walking in the restaurant, she goes, now, if it was on purpose, God will be mad. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And she was like, but it wasn't on purpose. And she walked in and I was like, what did you mean? Hold on, what's going on? So anyway, I think that as I'm preparing, I mean, obviously I'm 15 years away from when Riley's 18 but I don't want to. So if you're a young parent listening, or not even a parent, and you're anticipating kids in the future, you're wanting kids in the future, have an intentional mindset that again starts from the top of the pyramid or whatever, to keep that, or at the core of the wagon wheel, of proclaiming a heart for Jesus. But also in the midst of that, what that means is the mentality on us should be to interact with them in every phase, still with the same heart, but the actions are going to look different in the midst of that. So like,
yeah, how can you teach your kid even at a young age to have a heart to honor Jesus?
Yeah.
Like Riley interacting with Adeline, there's practical things that you're going to have to tell her in that, but it can still be under the umbrella or from the perspective of,
absolutely,
or the philosophy, even life philosophy, if you will, of how do I honor Jesus with my life?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Even, and this is maybe where some parents struggle. Like Riley technically hasn't professed faith in a way that you're like, I'm be confident in her salvation, but she has talked a lot. You've been telling me about the gospel. Yeah. So like that is a little bit of a journey, like where you're not waiting till she puts faith in Jesus.
No, yeah.
To start teaching her.
Exactly.
Right? You're teaching her even now to have a heart for Jesus. And I think that's where maybe Ryan is like with older kids, some parents struggle is like, let's say your kid sucks. Let's say your kid is not a good kid, right?
Wow.
I know. Which sadly, there's like we meet a lot of people who are in that, they're like, I don't like my kid, or like my kid's an a-hole. And you know what I mean? Like we run into those situations, sadly. It's not super common, but it happens. Yeah. The responsibility doesn't change as a parent.
Absolutely.
Your responsibility still is to teach them to have a heart for Jesus. Even if that kid hasn't professed faith in Jesus, you still have to point them towards Jesus.
Yeah.
What is it Paul says? How will they hear unless someone preaches? They're talking about the gospel. Like this is a little bit of a side note. I've wondered if the reason you see more kids put faith in Jesus who grew up in homes that have already professed faith in Jesus, like the parents have, is because what they're hearing a lot is the gospel. How will people hear unless someone preaches? Like versus a kid who doesn't grow up in that environment, they don't hear the gospel, right? Maybe till later. These kids oftentimes get saved like in college or after because they hear the gospel, right? And so it doesn't change your responsibility as a parent, like point them towards Jesus. And I think if we continue to point them towards Jesus, what that does is it allows us to teach them all the other things in life or influence them in all the other areas of life without the weight of like, how good of a job did I do? So for example, I'm a terrible mechanic. Like it's almost worse. It's almost worse that I like can kind of do it a little bit because it just gets me in trouble. You know what I mean? Like I think I can do anything, and just like I'm the ultimate DIY. So like when I teach my kids to do like, I mean, the oil change is pretty simple, but like like there's a part of me that's like, it's like Pierce, we're talking about your truck. Like we need to add some more refrigerant in your AC in your old truck. Yeah. And you were like, is it safe? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I know this is what you're supposed to do. I don't know what the danger is. So like, I'm terrible at that. So I might feel the weight of like someday are my kids going to mess up their car because I told them, you know, like maybe.
Yeah.
And I just have to deal with that. I have to do the best I can. I think some parents probably, maybe this is what you're expressing, Ryan, with the joke of the tally. I think maybe some parents are viewing themselves through the lens of other parents.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying, this is who I am, this is my tendency, this is my personality, these are the skills I have that I can teach my kids. So I'm going to do the best I can within the confines of what I'm able to do to point them towards Jesus and help them succeed in life in whatever they're doing for the glory of Jesus. That I think that kind of has to be the heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I saw I have no idea if it was a conference or what. The setting was very weird, but it was like a psychologist giving a presentation. And it kind of felt like a slam poetry venue, though. It was weird. But anyway, he was talking about parenting and stuff like that. One of the questions
like
was...
Mike Myers and So I Married an Axe Murderer, that kind of...
I haven't seen the movies.
Oh,
no. Yeah, that weird? Yeah, I've never seen that one. Yeah.
Oh, man. Next step.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, we already got to start a movie. Put the note on, just put everything on that old paper.
Yeah.
But anyway, one of the things they had brought up...
It's like an orange on a toothpick.
Oh, I have heard that joke, though.
Get that
but anyway,
it's like an orange on a toothpick.
We should do like a simpler streaming party. I don't know how legal that is, but it's like
very illegal.
Where we just put the camera on us and not the movie, and just mute the audio so we didn't see our faces the whole time.
Yeah.
But anyway, what he was talking about, then this wasn't from a Christian perspective, but somebody had got up and asked, I forget exactly how they phrased their question, but basically like, how can I be a better parent? Like, I think they had just had a child. I think their kid was like around 1 year old, and they were like they already felt the weight of being a bad parent. And so one of the things he asked immediately was just like, I'm assuming you've gone through some sort of traumatic experience or rough experience, probably with your parents. And she was like, yeah, my mother. And so he's like, you don't have to go into details about it. But he kind of walked through some of those things and just kind of generically about the mentality of going into parenting or going into a situation with past traumatic experiences or past perspectives, whatever that might be. And you're going to feel the bend towards that. He said, but do you feel like you've ever like looked at your daughter with the same eyes that your mom might have looked on you? And she was like, no, I've pushed myself away from that. And I love this child. And he said, there we go. Like that, the whole perspective shift has already changed. He's like, will you mess up? Probably. You're not going to be perfect? Probably. Are you going to question some things you did later in life? Probably. But your perspective has already shifted away from any perspective that your parents were, where that shouldn't be a fear that weighs you down. And so wherever you are in life, if you've had great godly parents or not so godly parents, I think we can learn something from that in the midst of like, if we have a perspective shift to what you're saying of teaching a heart for Jesus, and that might look different practically in whatever stage of life they're in, the perspective shift has already happened, and we are aiming for that goal and shooting for that goal with the best of our abilities. And if something happens later in life, don't weigh ourselves where maybe a mistake may have happened, teaching a car wrong, whatever it may, or fixing a car wrong, whatever it might be, not allowing that to define you.
Yeah.
But in the midst of that, and what's also really cool, like side note, in the midst of that, you're able to, as an individual, lean upon the grace and goodness and patience of God. And then in the midst of that, you're also parenting your kids by them viewing your experience with your relationship with God, because you're showing,
be willing to say like, I didn't do that very well.
Exactly. And so like acknowledging that like my identity isn't in how I taught that, my identity is in Christ. Mm-hmm. And then also you're parenting your kids in that moment, however old they are, which one of my favorite things that Riley will say is like, now Riley acknowledges like mistakes happen. And so like trying to shape her perspective of like mistakes happen, God's love doesn't change. It's just like, so like she understands these things where like her first thought won't be to hide something from mom and dad because she did something wrong. Her first thought's like, oh no. And just like, she's just overwhelmed by the thing. And then I come in and I'm like, hey, everything's okay. And so we'll clean up the mess, whatever it may be. And so same intentionality of like, if we have a goal and we have a perspective shift to make everything about proclaiming Jesus, striving to teach and shape a heart for Jesus in our children, and we're doing everything with our best ability, we shouldn't have the weight of guilt and shame or anything coming into that, but rather the freedom that we have in Christ, and therefore teaching that as well.
Yeah, thinking about it as an opportunity rather than like a I always think about like when I had a big test coming up, I'd feel this like stress.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think a lot of people parent like that. Like,
Yeah.
like they're waiting to see if their kid passes the test and how good of a job they did, instead of thinking about it as an opportunity God's given them to invest into their kid. I also think one important thing would be to recognize the areas you're not good in, and have other people come in and help. Like we see this all the time in ministry. Like there's a lot of people not very good with finances.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And sadly, their pride is going to keep their kid from being good at finances, because they're going to be like, well, no, here's how you do it.
Yeah.
You know, instead, and I'm not saying like, obviously there's debatable perspectives of finances.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, just like some practical things like, hey, you shouldn't spend more than you make.
Yeah. Yes.
I love that SNL skit.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'll have to show you on the break.
Sounds great. So, but like maybe someone's a parent and they're like, I don't really know. I don't feel like I'm good at finances. Fine. Then bring someone into your life or your kid's life that can help them learn about finances. Or I don't know anything about fixing cars. I don't think everybody has to know cars. I'm just saying like these are opportunities that people don't take because of pride. Like it makes you feel like you're less if you bring someone else in that's good at those things. And I think that's where probably a lot of parents struggle. They want people to look at them and go, you're a good parent. When actually you're a good parent by bringing people in who can help your kid succeed in that area of life.
Absolutely. That's
good parenting. You don't care what other people think about you. You care more about your kid than what other people think about you.
Yeah.
I think for me, I just wish that we as Christian parents would move past the idea of, I don't know, like regulating behavior. And instead of it being like, well, I've raised good kids because they went to church, or I've raised good kids because they went to youth camp, or I've raised good kids because they sit at the front for worship, and it, like all of those things can be manipulated. All those things can be just things you do. Yeah. Like there are cheating spouses every week that still buy their wives flowers. Yeah. And you know what I mean? Like for me, those things in and of themselves have zero value. And so again, community of believers is very important, and worship of God, very important. Yeah. But I don't know, man, like I just, what my hope is that I have taught my kids enough to depend upon Christ and to value who he is, what he's done, what he's accomplished, that their decisions that they make will be based on those things.
Can I make a point on that? Yeah. I think that's genius. What you said earlier about like parents who send their kids off like to college, for example, or like try to get them plugged in with the church, which is a good thing, but you were saying like that's not the end. I think that's exactly what you're getting at there. So if you have set the perspective with your kids that what we do on a weekly basis when we gather for worship on Sundays at the 456 is a crucial part of our life, they will feel like that's a crucial part of their life later. And let's just say hypothetically, Asher leaves, he goes off to college somewhere, does whatever he's going to do.
Right.
And let's just say like he doesn't go to church for a few months. My guess is he's probably going to go, man, I feel like something's missing.
Sure.
Because you did a good job of not saying you have to go to church, but involving him in the church you were going to or pastoring in a way where he felt the value while he was a child.
Yeah.
And I think that's the tension you're talking about with that first statement. Parents think I just got to get my kid into church.
Yeah, there's a heart.
It's not
that's lacking.
I think it's like maybe the correct like direction.
Yeah,
but not the right premise.
Well, they're trying to achieve the desired result.
Yes,
without
the heart,
without building the correct heart.
Right.
And so like you were talking earlier about helping your kids be correct thinkers. One of the things that I will occasionally, well, every time I pass by a church sign that's dumb, I go.
So every time you pass a church sign,
yeah, I go.
You're talking about the church signs that have like a what do you call it?
Yeah, just
phrases
anecdotal kind of thing, or the
not just like a church sign that says the 456 church.
Right.
Yeah, dumb church sign.
Yeah, and so there was one.
Although there are some of those that you're like, have you seen the John Chris thing where he'll show you a sign and it says, "Is it a weed shop or a church?"
Oh no, that's funny.
I'm so saying,
trying to teach my kids to think correctly, and so like. I'll pass a sign and I'll groan, and Riker now will be like, "What's wrong with that one, Dad?" And I'll say, "Well, the verse they have on there, see, they've quoted this verse, and then they had this little thing on it, but that verse isn't actually about that; it's about this." And like, so I'm trying to even teach them in those moments to like handle the scripture correctly, think correctly about those things. One of the things that I do every Sunday is on our way to lunch, I'll just say, all right, boys, what stuck out to you today? Like, what was the thing that, and they've gotten where they started taking notes, which I'm not asking them to do, but like they'll take notes or they'll highlight.
They have a yellow legal pad and where they take notes.
Dude, I have so many Lego legal pads. Never mind. I can't say it. But it's been neat to see that they're beginning to understand it, that they're beginning to get it, and wanting them to, I don't know, like I think apart from Christ, probably the biggest decision that a person will make is who they marry. And so like I try to think constantly about how to shape. I try to. I speak very highly of Michelle in front of the boys. I speak very highly of Michelle to Michelle in front of the boys. I try to do things that would create like reminding them that, you know, God has blessed us with her. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm trying to, and so I don't know. I'm not really, I personally, and I recognize everybody learns differently. And so the way I learn shapes how I teach my kids. I'm not a good classroom learner. I never was. I was a good student, but I'm not I don't like to sit down for an hour in front of somebody and listen and take notes. I don't enjoy it. I enjoy conversation. I enjoy quick, you know, like little sound bites or different things. I like things that stimulate my thought, whatever. I like to read. So I'm a kind of a self-learner. I like to, anyway, so one of the things that I'll do is I'll just make statements to my boys in passing, but I've made the same types of statements to them in the course of their lives 200, 300 times. And it'll just be a 5-second conversation, you know, like, well, remember, because what you're doing, I guess, with Riley, you know, and you're reminding her it's just a mistake and it's not the gospel or whatever. And like giving my boys language that's repetitive that they can begin to understand so that they're learning that even dad, because like what you said about the car, not knowing all the stuff about the car. So Asher he is turning 15 next week. And we, I looked for the online, you know, parent taught teacher, whatever, driver's ed thing.
Hey, side note on that. Don't make the mistake I did and sign up for the one that's cheaper because it says it comes with a free trial of the $5 a month roadside assistance and then forget about it for a year. Just pay the more expensive one and now you don't have to worry about it.
So I signed them up for it and it said that they can start this at 14 and all this kind of stuff. I was like, I didn't know you could start at 14. That's really cool because I didn't do mine until 15. And so last week we took him down to the DPS. We had finished the first section of that and we took him down to the DPS to get his license. We went through to get the permit. Sorry, thank you. And they're like, oh, you have the wrong piece of paper. So I was like, cool. So we were
always the DMV.
We rescheduled.
Always.
We went back with the right piece of paper. But it was his proof of enrollment paper from the school. And they had filled it out wrong the first time. So he got another one from the school. And then when I was putting all the paperwork together, I grabbed the wrong one, the old form. So we went in a second time and they're like, this is the wrong one. I'm like, no, we got crap. The new one's sitting on the table at home. So then we went back and then they're like, oh, wait, this bill won't work. And I'm like, crap. So the fourth time we went back.
I'm getting pissed just hearing your story.
The fourth time, and poor Asher's getting more and more discouraged because he's so excited to start driving, right? So the fourth time we go back, they're like, they take us through the whole process. Yeah, everything's in order. You're great. Now go sit down over here and talk to this lady. We're there for 30, 45 minutes. And he talks to the lady and she goes, you're not 15 yet. And she goes, you're not 15 for 2 more weeks. And he goes, yeah. And she goes, you can't have your permit till you're 15. Well, I had read on the,
you can do the work.
You can do the course.
You can't get the permit till 15.
Right. So it's like, hey, you can start your course at 14 to get your driver's permit. But you still can't get your permit till you're 15, and I missed that fine point. And so I'm like, what an idiot I am. Like,
so you felt bad as a dad.
So stupid because here I am dragging him 4 times to this, right? So,
well, I'll tell you this: he won't make that mistake with his kid,
and I won't make that mistake with Riker,
which is kind of what you were saying earlier, Pierce.
Yeah. But one of the things that I had to do is I asked Asher, I said, "Are you frustrated?" Because I'm certainly frustrated, and I had to just shape it and go. But you know what? This isn't eternity, and this isn't like we'll fix it. And now we know we don't have to hurry back here next Monday. We'll wait for 2 weeks and then we'll come back. And now we know all the paperwork we need. So but like just taking that moment to go, look, man, if you're frustrated, I get it. I'm so sorry that I screwed this up. I'm frustrated too. But Hey, let's frame it. Let's frame the perspective, and then we're good. And
the expectation shouldn't be that we're perfect parents.
Right.
I think that's where people miss it, is they're trying to achieve something that's not achievable. I think you have to do the best you can in the environment that you're in.
Yeah.
And be smart about it, be wise about it. Like you're acknowledging to Asher, like, all right, I missed this
4 times.
Well,
yeah.
Technically only missed it once in terms of the 15, but you know what I mean? Like, but I think that my guess is he will look back on that later and go, that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
You know, like that was a good lesson to, like, there will probably be multiple generations of people who don't make that mistake because they heard this story about their granddad or their great granddad or their great great granddad. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you set something down the line that will be beneficial. So I think that's like what I just said. I bet most people don't think of.
Yeah.
Most people aren't. They're thinking, what a screw up I am, instead of going, all right, this is something that will actually have an impact.
And it didn't cost us anything, and it's
not
like
that big of a deal.
But
it's just frustrating.
Trying to shape my wife and my boys and myself from the perspective of what's eternal, what really matters.
Yep.
And so
that's huge. Like shaping that in your kids.
Well, Cristóbal this last week just did awards banquet. So for high school, they do the academic awards banquet one night. The next night is the athletic awards banquet. And then this morning before recording, we did the junior high academic and academic awards banquet. They don't really do an athletic one for the junior high, but you know, like I just told the boys, like, I'm just proud of you guys for trying stuff. Like Asher didn't tell us, decided to try out for one act this year. And Ben McCann, who is the most decorated one act play guy at Cristóbal. Like he's killed so much stuff, man. He's so good at it. It's his senior year. And they had to pick somebody who was in one act to audition with. And so Ben and Asher teamed up for their audition, and Asher's in one act for next year. And so he's super excited. Yeah. And I was like, dude, like I never would have wanted to do that. And I was like, I'm just proud of you for going for stuff, man.
What if they'd had a pterodactyl person in the
only in 4th grade, man. It's not like I kept pretending to be a pterodactyl all the way through high school, you know? But I remind my boys at these awards banquets as we were driving home one night. I was just like, look, I will always love you guys. And I said, and if you get awards or you don't get awards, that does not shape for me how I view, and it doesn't shape how God views you. Yeah. And I was like, so pursue everything. Yeah. Try at everything. And if you fail, you fail. But
it's a funny tension with parents. Like that you almost feel like you're less if somebody else's kid gets more awards.
Yeah.
And that's a stupid perspective. Yeah. It's probably a reality. But it's kind of a stupid perspective.
Yeah.
To like let your it's pride.
Let your ego be shaped by what your kid accomplishes.
Yeah. Be proud of your kid. Let your kid be the reason that you're proud of them, not their accomplishments.
Yeah. Well, and I just told the boys, I said, look, I said I will always love you. And I said I can't know possibly the choices that you'll make in your life. And I said, I can't promise you I'll always be proud of you. I said, but what I can promise you is that I will always serve you, and that whatever happens, and I said, it will not change how I view you, as like I will love you, and it will not change God's love for you. And I said, so remember that God's love for you is not conditional based upon what you've done or failed to do.
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean for me. Like, I'm not a classroom teacher. I don't sit down and do that Bible study with the boys, but I have those kinds of conversations with them 20 times a week. You know?
I'm not 100% sure that works with the majority of kids.
What?
Sitting down and having that long Bible study as a parent.
Yeah. I was starting to get panicky. I was like, crap. What do I need to do?
What you're doing is wrong.
Let me take notes.
I mean, I don't know. I have not seen it. I'll say that way. Maybe it's anecdotal. I have not. I feel like I have a little bit of expertise in this.
Sure.
Because I see probably more Christian kids than most people do. But like, I haven't seen that work. What I have seen work is what you were telling us earlier, where like a kid gets a group of friends who all have this heart for Jesus, and they begin to grow together and ask questions together and learn together. And then that group kind of is what pushes the growth. But I'm not saying don't do that with your kids. Well, and that
started for you at 15 or 16. You started with a group of guys at 15 or 16.
Yeah. And that was instrumental, I think, in my spiritual maturity moving forward. And it was obvious that God was like prepping me for what was coming next in college.
At 16, I didn't have a group of friends like that. But at 16, there was a men's Bible study that met on Thursday mornings at 6:00 at our church. And I would get up and I would go to that Bible study by myself, and then go to school. Just to be around.
That's awesome.
I wanted to be around people who were talking about Jesus.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the friends to do that.
I'm guessing you were at least 15.
I was
so you
16.
Get your permit.
Yeah. Shut up.
I do think there's a cool sense of like letting your kids begin to like take on their own personality and like identity that is important in that growth as well. Like shaping each kid in the way, well, it's Proverbs, I think. Wisdom, like shaping each kid, like the idea of training a child up is like bending. My dad always told me this is like bending a bow in the direction it's supposed to bend. So it's not like taking a bow and trying to bend it backwards from its grain. It's the Hebrew implication is like you bend it in the way it's supposed to go. So like my dad actually asked me this week, we were at an awards thing for Seth. Seth is a very decorated kid, like awards wise. Which is funny though, because then you go to like, we went to a deal that was like top 25 kids at Central, not 25%, but top 25 kids. And he's not getting very many awards because then you have like the top, he's like number 14, which is awesome. And then you got the top 10 kids who have all these awards. Anyway, so it's like, he's not decorated compared to them. Right. But like, he's getting all these awards, got all these football awards. And my dad asked me when we were at one of these awards deals last week, he goes, does Aiden feel like he's less because of like Seth's
different personality or whatever?
And I was like, I don't think so, because I think Aiden understands that that's not who he is. Like that's different. Aiden also, Seth got a really high score on his SAT. Aiden actually wasn't too far behind him. I think Aiden was like a 12 something on his SAT, which is pretty good. Like it's not like way above average, but it's really, really good. But Aiden also understands that's who he is. So like I have to celebrate Aiden for who Hayden is, like in his strengths. And so like, that's what I mean. Like letting him and his personality become the way he is. So one of my proudest dad moments in the last month was Aiden asked me, he said, hey dad, instead of renting me a tux or a suit for prom, would you buy me a pair of Ray-Bans? And I was like, absolutely. He's thinking value. One night rental or sunglasses I can wear for a while. And I in that moment, it almost didn't matter how much the Ray-Bans cost, because I was like, that decision from a practical and financial perspective, I was like, I'm so freaking proud of that as personally me. Now, some people might put more value in the night, right? It's a personal value system for me, but I was like, absolutely. So then I bought Seth some too, because I wasn't renting him a tux suit either. But like, that's where Aiden gets in his 1994 Jeep with the top off, and he puts those Ray-Bans on, and you could just see it in him. He's just like, totally. Seth gets in my old 2008 Tahoe and could care less what anybody thinks about him or his car. Like it's Aiden's different, right? So I'm going to encourage them in their personalities and their identities and the way they are. Grayson is,
which is why it cannot be about practical it can't be about here's the way you should look. It has to be about here's where your heart should be, because both of your oldest boys, very different in personalities, can both have hearts that beat for Christ.
Yes.
And it will shape them inside their personalities
in a different way, right? Yeah. I'll brag on one more. Lane Honey, John Honey's son, texted me a few months ago and asked me about a worship song that they were actually someone sang at a youth group. And he was like, man, I just don't know how I feel about this song, which I think a lot of people might have taken as like negative. I took it as Lane actually processing, like, I'm struggling through this.
He's thinking through thoughts that most adults don't think through.
Right. And so we texted back and forth. I kind of gave him some thoughts on it, and we ended up in a cool place. And I was so proud of Lane that he's actually thinking through it. Like this, he's not just singing because he's supposed to sing it. He's like, I don't know how I feel about that. Yeah, you're right. Most adults don't even process through songs. So like that's got to be a proud dad moment for John. I don't even know if I told him that happened, but like that your kid is thinking through it. So Lane's a little more reserved and stoic. He's less like excitable, right? So he's probably not going to be the kid at youth camp who's like jumping up and down on stage in front of the, like, that's not him, right? So he's going to be more of a thinker, more of the reserved. Like, so I'm super proud of Lane for thinking through he's becoming who he is and his identity and his personality and his tendencies. And I think as parents, we have to like recognize those things and spur our kids on in those areas.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we don't push them sometimes in like ways that would stretch them.
Yeah.
But I think we have to recognize I don't have any expectation that Aiden's going to have the same kind of award Seth did.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But probably,
who cares?
Probably someday when Seth's staying in Aiden's mountain home.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Because Aiden wants to do real estate investing. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Seth will be like, I'm really glad that you didn't follow the path I followed.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I just think as a parent, we should pull the weight back from us, remove our pride and ego. That's the same thing, I guess. And say, my goal for my kid is to teach them to honor Jesus with their life. And then out of that can flow, whether it's a wagon wheel or pyramid, whatever, all these other practical things we begin to teach them. And hopefully that pulls the weight off of parents of like, how good of a job am I doing at teaching them these things, and putting the weight on how good of a job am I doing at pointing them towards Jesus.
And I'll say it again, it will be really difficult to point your children towards Jesus if Jesus isn't the core for you as a parent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise, then you're just pointing them to things.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you won't be able to do it because you don't understand it.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about posting the pyramid, and I was like, "Oh yeah, we can put up Micah's pyramid of parenting. That would work out." And then you change it to a wagon wheel, and I was like, "Well, how can I do that?" Then I thought Micah's wagon wheel. I'll do wagon wheel of raising kids.
That's awesome.
You were talking about award ceremonies and like stressing to your kids that like you're proud of them, but like that's not the weight of your being proud of them or whatever. And so which I feel like, I don't know, we can talk about like some of the lines with that later, but I was thinking about, I saw a meme the other day, and it was the ride home with a teammate that was on the losing team in Air Bud. And so it was the dad just gripping the thing.
You lost to a dog.
And the kids in the backseat just like, so dad, he was like 14 points. The dog got 14 points on, and just like, and he just shakes his head and just keeps trying.
See,
he was a dog.
This was our conversation, I think, about back in the day about telling, like, when do you tell a kid they're not good at sports?
Yeah.
There's some balance in that, and I think it also depends on the kid. Like, like I have a feeling you two and your personalities would be a lot less likely to say something to your kid like, "Are you serious? 14 points, right?"
Yeah.
I'm probably more likely to do that. It's just personality, right? So there's balance in that. Like, I have to think, like, what's my goal in this?
Absolutely.
How do you? I think you're always probably in a better place, Ryan, in this, where your goal is you want your kid to understand that you love them and cherish them and are proud of them in spite of whatever. I do have this opinion that sports are this incredible venue for people, especially kids, to learn life lessons.
Sure.
Outside of the pressure of actual reality in life. There's so much weight that goes into sports for whatever reason. I don't know why, but it's there. I watch professionals do it on a consistent basis on the disc golf pro tour. That weight is there, and it's an amazing opportunity for you to learn life lessons. So while I agree, I want my kids to always feel like I'm proud of them, period, I also think sports are a good venue to begin to train and teach your kids those things.
And when my kids have come home, because this is like when your boys, because you played soccer, this is like when your boys were really little and playing soccer, and you're like, I'm not gonna make them practice every day unless they want to.
Yeah.
But when my boys came home and said, when Asher said, I want to be able to, I don't know, like he's really into basketball, and he's like, I want to be able to shoot better. I'm like, then you need to be shooting every day.
Yeah.
You know, like there are things you can do, you know, like one of the things that I keep telling them is you're built like me. And so if you want to be bigger next year on the court, you need to start eating. You need to eat and eat and eat and eat, you know? And I was like, every night before bed, get another bowl of ice cream. And he goes, seriously? I'm like, yes. Like it's going to be really hard for you to gain weight.
Yeah.
It's just going to be.
Yeah.
And so
someday he's going to be like 40, like 500 pounds. He's like, Dad, why did you start this?
I just need my dad to be proud of me.
I told you to stop, you know, but like trying to help them accomplish the things they want to accomplish and be excellent at those things.
That's why I said balance, because I think it's situational. It's hard to say a practical, like, hey, this is the rule for every kid. It's got to be, some kids you got to push harder than the others.
Well, and I also try to teach my boys the importance of rest. Like there's time that it's okay to just rest.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. Which is why we all like to take our families to do stuff.
Yes.
Vacations.
Yeah.
We kind of put, I mean, it's probably true. There are people who could say like, y'all are making some bad financial decisions in some of the trips you make. They're probably right. But I think for us, it's a value system, right? Like
Yeah.
what we're still being practical with our trips. We're not.
Well, yeah. But like, for example, we've stayed in a cabin that has been lent to us in Ruidoso for the last 6 years. And we stayed for a week.
Yeah.
But this year that cabin's not available.
Right.
So what are we doing? We're
Spending a lot more
Airbnb
money.
it, and we're spending, and because we value that time together.
Right. Give me a couple more years and I'll have another cabin for you.
I know, I can't wait.
Awesome.
Pierce?
I think you said something a few minutes ago, Micah, that was a simpler view. I don't know if.
Yeah, I think putting as a parent, taking the weight, taking your ego and putting it to the side,
Mm-hmm.
and saying my kid is the goal,
Mm-hmm.
and teaching them to honor Jesus with their life, and then out of that, whether it's you do pyramid or wagon wheel, out of that, do your best to like help them succeed in whatever part of life they're in, whether
Mhm.
that's you teaching them things or bringing other people in to help them learn things.
Yeah.
Do your best to help them succeed with the goal of honoring Jesus.
Awesome. Yeah. So if you're out there, wherever you guys listening and watching are out there, whatever phase of life you're in, with your kids, if you have kids, if you are a parent, we'd love to hear your type of stories, your type of growth, or the growth that you may have experienced in these things. If you already have a kid out of the household, what was one of the biggest things that you've learned in light of the gospel, in light of being a parent who is striving to glorify God and instill this mindset in their this proper mentality within their children? So like, we'd love to. These are the types of conversations that I think are brilliant within our community, not only the simpler community, but within just the Christian community, within community amongst brothers and sisters in Christ, because we're able to push one another and glean from one another and grow from one another. I mean, a conversation I had when I was 22 with Micah has shed a new light on parenting for me, and has been applied to how I'm parenting and being intentional with whatever phase of life my children are. So these types of conversations, may it be behind the scenes for you guys with your friends, may it be through messaging on us on social media, we want to encourage you guys to grow and to learn from either this community or the community that you have at home, because parenting is a part of life. Like, most people become parents at some point. Everybody was a kid at one point, and so like these things affect us in a very real way. And now that we have,
We're not sure if Adam was, but
that's true. Yeah. But in light of the gospel, in light of who we are in Christ, now we're able to encourage one another and point each other towards ways that we can glorify God as parents. So it's exciting to be a part of communities.
I kind of hope Eve wasn't either, because then it's really
it's
awkward.
really weird. Yeah. Well, it depends on how you define kid, because I mean, technically he was a day old, and so he just probably looked like a full grown man. He had an issue. He had a physiological issue. What is it? Is it Jack, or no? It's Benjamin Button, where he ages backwards. You know who is my favorite person? I don't know. I can't think of any sort of joke.
You know who else ages backwards?
You know who else pretty old? Steven. We're at the Garden Audio as always. Steven records and mixes and finalizes the mix for all of the audio going on with this podcast. He makes it sound great every week. That was one of our mindsets going into doing this, that if we were to do a podcast, it wasn't going to be just a phone in the middle of the table recording audio. We wanted to make sure that it was done well, done in an enjoyable way. That way people can listen for an hour and not feel like their ears are strained or having to filter through stuff. And what's great is that Steven stepped up and has made this sound great every single week for the last 4 years. And so excited to have
4 years this month. That's crazy.
Have Steven be a part of all of it. So go show Steven some love. His the studio doesn't have an Instagram, but you can find him at 87 Realty Group. That's his and his wife realty page. And so if you want to get a hold of him, you can message him through there on Instagram. While you're over there, follow at simplerpod. That's where we are. Tagged in the show notes, you've got links to Simpler Bible. You've got links to Eagles Wings Disc Golf, which is a ministry that Micah teams up with. And you've got links to Micah's ministry page as well. There's all these things you can check out of what's going on through the Simpler community, through Micah's ministry, through even the 456. The church where we pastor is also tagged down there. So go check out what's going on. If you want to be involved, shoot some messages. If you want to be involved financially, there are donate tabs at Simpler Bible as well as Micah's ministry page. And so there's all sorts of ways to get involved with the community we've got going on here. And we're so thankful that you've listened, that you've watched, that you're a part of it. And we love each and every one of you. And as always, keep Christ as core. What could be simpler than that? Catch y'all next week. Bye.